Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Spiritual Dessert. I'm Pastor Michael from The Current in Naples, Florida. This is an open discussion forum. If you have questions about your spiritual journey, about religion in particular, history, faith, science, how all of these things intermingle, please feel free to comment in the box or ask questions in the box, or as I'm recapping the previous week, if anything comes up that you'd like to discuss, please feel free to share with the community. Ideally, Spiritual Dessert will grow into a forum where we all gather and share our journeys with one another and share the concepts about God and community that work for us in a spiritual sense with each other so that we can all learn and grow together. While we kind of get moving today, I'll give you a recap of what we've been talking about at The Current this week. The Current, I'll remind you, is a postmodern progressive Christian church. We like to look at the many different ways that the journey of Jesus, the stories about Jesus, and the things that he teaches can be interpreted so that we might better put to use his practices today, so that we can both move into a more intimate relationship with God, and then through that intimate relationship, move into more intimate and loving relationship with one another. This week, we talked a little bit about the story of Job in the Bible. Most of you, I'm sure, remember what happens in that terrific work. It's like a Missioner novel. It concerns just this series of unfortunate events that befall Job, who maintains his faith all the way through. And often the story is used to show what a faithful human being looks like. I hear people talk about the faith of Job. They have the faith of Job, even though they're going through difficult times. And while the story of Job is ostensibly about, keeping the faith even when times are difficult, knowing that God is still with us, even as our lives are going through turmoil, the story of Job is also about looking at God differently. Because one of the concepts that Job wrestles with is this idea that God does things. Right? We've all heard that phrase, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, right? Well, that attributes both the good and bad things in our lives to some sort of action of God, some sort of interventionist action. And Job approaches this idea of an interventionist God in a very interesting and difficult manner. Because what happens in the story, if you recall, is that the adversary, also called Satan, but in this case the adversary is a better analogy for Satan. The adversary approaches God. And says that he has been wandering the earth, the adversary has been wandering the earth, kind of looking at humanity, and God says, what's up? So this relationship really already, you should think of almost as a mafioso type relationship, right? Satan, the adversary in this case, is the consigliere to the Godfather, God the Father, literally the Godfather, who has Satan out traipsing all over the world just to make sure humans are staying in line and to see how worshipful they're being. So already the image of God that's portrayed in Job is not the best. It's not painting God in the best light. And it's intentional on the author's part. The author wants us to think about a God who will do what this God is about to do. So the adversary reports back, the consigliere reports back to the Godfather and says, humans are kind of worthless. You're really wasting your time on them. And Godfather says, well, what about Job? Job is perfect. Look at him. He's never said a bad word against me. He never curses me. He's always faithful. To which the adversary replies, sure, he is always faithful. You're right about Job, but you've sort of fenced him in too. He's got everything he could desire. He has a beautiful, loving family and grandchildren and a minor army at his disposal and acres and acres of property and thousands of heads of livestock. Of course he praises you. He's got everything he needs. But I'll bet, the adversary says, if you took everything away from Job, that he would curse you pretty quickly. So God, for some reason, says, you know what? Let's test this out. This is portraying a very petty God who wants to make sure that Job is not only worshipful and faithful, but faithful for the right reasons, right? Now remember, this isn't necessarily a reflection of the way God is. This story of Job reflects the way people were thinking about their relationship with God at that time. And Job is, about 3,000 years old, something like that, right? So we're already wrestling that long ago, millennia ago, with this notion of a God who does things to us, both bad and good, for whatever reason. So as the story goes along, and we're starting to understand that God is permitting the adversary to do all of these things to Job, merely to test his faith, two things happen. First of all, Job just takes it. He takes all of this abuse that's really being dished out, not from Satan, but from God, through Satan. Job just takes it, sits there and takes it. This is God's prerogative, Job says at one point, because God can do what God wants to do. Who am I to know? And in fact, later in the story, when Job has finally had enough, and still doesn't curse God, but demands an explanation at least, as is his right in a covenantal relationship, God essentially says the same thing. Hey, you can't understand what I'm doing or why I do things to you because I'm God. Well, this ultimately leaves the author of the story unsatisfied. That's an unsatisfactory answer for a God who has also told us that it is in loving covenantal relationship with us. Because the relationship displayed in Job is not covenantal, it's codependent. We are not supposed to have a codependent relationship with God. And this image of God that gives and takes away, this image of God that I'm presented with often by people of a more fundamental nature on Facebook who say that we're all going to go to hell for thinking differently or for even asking these questions. That image of God is unhelpful on our spiritual journey, and our ancestors were already starting to discard that view of an intercessory, puppet-like God thousands and thousands of years ago. So I say all of this only to encourage those of you who are also wrestling with a vision of God who both condemns and loves like some sort of egotistical parent. Those of you who are struggling to discard that image and move to something different, something that maybe is more conducive to your spiritual development at this point in time, it's okay to do that. I know part of the struggle with leaving an image of God behind, especially one like the retributive justice God that's been sort of nailed into especially American Christians for a couple hundred years. Leaving that behind can be difficult. It's comforting to a lot of us. And we can also be told by other people who believe in that image that we're going to go to hell for not believing in that image anymore. We're going to go to hell for questioning that image. Well, I say to you, the Bible shows very clearly that questioning our image of God, especially an image of God that's unhealthy, is required and traditional. We've been doing it forever. The people in the Bible from beginning to end is a line of questioning about what God is, how God interacts in the world, and what we've got to do with it. And we can see our opinions changing as we learn more about the natural world and the order of things and start to understand just how interconnected and interrelated we all are as a human species. The opinion of God changes in the Bible, and Job very clearly wrestles with a changing opinion about what God is and how God interacts. Do we want to believe that God is so petty and egotistical that a flunky, the adversary, can come to God and goad God into raining atrocities upon somebody who has never done anything wrong in their lives? We know very well that bad things happen to good people all the time. I don't attribute any of that to God. That's just the way things are. That's life. Well, let me change that. I do attribute it to God, but only in the sense that I understand God as part of the process of being alive. For me, God is a processor, not a prosecutor, right? God is in process of all of these things that happen in our lives, but I do not believe God is in control of them. And I don't think God really desires control of them. I think part of the reason that we exist is because God has imagined us into being. God, this physical reality that we have, the good, the bad, the indifferent, all of it is an experience for God. And I find hope in that. And I think Job found hope in that. Understanding that even as we're going through these horrible atrocities, it's not God doing it to us because we're not faithful enough or we're not good enough. It's just life. It's what happens when the great divine consciousness of all being comes to life and becomes alive and then lets that life take its natural course, as God does in every single human being and plant and animal, not only on this planet, but on all planets. God lets nature take its course in the entire being and fabric of the universe. We see in the revelations of quantum physics that God is constantly moving and creating, that the fundamental, in fact, creative energy of the universe that we call God as religious people can also be thought of as a fundamental string, the primary substance of the universe that comes into creation. How? Maybe through a big bang of consciousness, of God's own self-awareness. So again, we have modern language that we can use to also consider our relationship with God in the same way that our ancient ancestors used kings and princes and heaven and hell to discuss their relationship with God. So it's okay to find the language that you need to explore your relationship with God, because of all of the many things that we have said that Jesus is about, the one thing that I find most common ground on with all Christians is that Jesus teaches us to love God with all of our hearts and to love each other as ourselves, to love our neighbors as ourselves, that universal love. To me, that means we must love people for who they are, for where they are, and for what they believe. So I believe in a particular sort of style of progressive Christianity. Other people do not. That's fine. I also love my Muslim brothers and sisters. I'm Jewish, so I love my Jewish brothers and sisters. I love my Hindu and Buddhist and Taoist and Shintoist and atheist brothers and sisters, because I understand all of it, and all of us are aspects of the single creative unit called God. God is everything, and we are all part of it. And the variety of ways in which we display it and describe it through both science and religion is to be embraced, because we can learn a little bit from everybody's religion. Everybody's got a little piece of it right, and all of us have a whole lot of it wrong, I'm sure. But as science and physics starts to reveal more about the natural way the universe works, I am seeing a powerful revelation of the way God works too, and it's implying to me that we are all part of the same thing, interconnected, and that we should start thinking about God that way, as the loving consciousness that connects us all, rather than the punitive, condemning Godfather with the consigliere who's just shaking us down for a vig. All right? Remember, it's okay to think like this. It's good to ask questions. The important thing is to come down on the side of love, universal and unconditional. I'm always happy to discuss these things with you, either here in Naples or online. You can email me or text me for a private consultation if you'd like. And if you have any other comments, please feel free to leave them in the comment box. And be graceful to each other. I understand we don't all agree about all things, but I hope we can agree that God cares less about what we believe than how we act out our belief in this life. So let's act with love and compassion toward our neighbors. Thank you. I hope to see you here on Sunday at 9 a.m. for Wired Word and 10 a.m. for God Connect, where we'll meditate and pray and read some scripture and discuss the importance of bearing light into the world as we prepare for the coming light of Jesus throughout the Advent holiday. Godspeed, my friends. Thanks for tuning in today.